Chapter 4. Journey to Meginland. Harald took a deep breath of the crisp morning air before strolling through the yard and away from Scarhouse to check on the encampment in the nearby fields. The sun had not yet risen, but the men were already breaking down their campsite. Some were taking down tents, others were extinguishing fires, loading carts and saddlebags with supplies and personal items. Harald could hear the fake deacon's booming voice barking orders to his soldiers. "Move quickly," the voice shouted. Harald peered between the tents and saw him towering over a young recruit who was struggling to gather his belongings. As he walked towards them, Harald could hear the sounds of clashing swords in the distance as some of the soldiers practiced their skills. "Pass me your longsword," the fake deacon commanded, pointing to it lying in the dirt on the ground. The boy handed it to him. Sigurd tested its weight and balance by slicing through the chilly morning air. "You should take better care of your sword, boy. It may just save your life one day," he scolded, spinning around to strike an imaginary enemy and almost hitting Harald in the process. Quick on his feet, Harald dodged the blow just in time. Sigurd was both surprised and apologetic when he saw Harald standing there. "My lord, I didn't realize you were behind me," he stammered out of embarrassment. "I could have killed you," Harald chuckled. "You'll have to be quicker than that if you want to slay me, my friend." The two men embraced each other in a friendly hug. "What brings you here so early in the morning, my lord?" Sigurd asked. "Well, apart from narrowly escaping being decapitated by my good friend the chieftain," Harald joked as he patted Sigurd on the back. "Your absence at Scarhouse last night was noticed at dinner." Sigurd noticed the young recruit staring in shock at the scene before quickly turning to him and slapping him across the face with the back of his hand. The boy's face reddened from the blow. "Have your kit packed up before I return, or I'll hit you even harder," Sigurd growled at him. The boy quickly wiped away a tear and began frantically gathering his things. As Sigurd turned back to Harald, who was smiling at him, they both couldn't help but break into laughter. "You still enjoy dishing out discipline to the new recruits, I see," Harald remarked with a grin. "I swear they're getting stupider every year," Sigurd replied with a gruff voice. Harald chuckled. "As I was saying, your absence at dinner did not go unnoticed. I have no patience for the politics of men. I'd rather stick a sword in my foe's stomach than play these silly games," Sigurd replied bluntly. "Don't worry, you'll get your chance soon enough," Harald reassured him with a pat on the back. "Now, come join us for breakfast. We have much to discuss before our journey back to Kirkvoe." As they walked together towards Scarhouse, Harald couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and loyalty towards Sigurd. Both had been in many battles over the years together. They had shared moments of grief and triumph, and through it all, their friendship only grew stronger. The chilly morning air seemed to be invigorating, as if the day held a new adventure for both waiting to be unravelled. As they entered the grand house, the inviting scents of freshly brewed ale, warm bread, and smoked fish filled their nostrils. Harald and Sigurd were welcomed into the ornate drawing room by Helga, Harald's mother, and her sister. "Ah, Harald, my son, and Sigurd, how are you both on this lovely morning?" Helga greeted them with a warm smile. "I am well, thank you, my lady." "And yourself?" replied Sigurd with a respectful nod. "I am well too, but eager to return to the palace today." "Come, sit and join us for breakfast," Helga said cheerfully, as she motioned for them to take a seat at the long dining table. Harald sat at the head of the table next to his mother on his left, and Fakokk, Harald's aunt, and the fake deacon, on his right. Sigurd greeted Fakokk with a nod before taking a seat next to her. "Where is Thorkel and Morna?" asked Harald, directing his question to his mother as a servant placed a silver plate in front of him. On it rested a delectable spread of bacon, pork, fish, and a small loaf of bread. He stopped by briefly earlier and said he had some matters to take care of. "And I believe Morna is tending to her menagerie," Helga replied as she took a bite of crispy bacon. Harald chuckled gruffly in response. "Why doesn't that surprise me?" he said, before noticing that the servant was still standing by his side with his head bowed. "What is it?" he asked impatiently. "Would you like wine or ale, my lord?" the servant asked timidly. "Wine will suffice," Harald snapped before digging into his meal. The man bowed and scurried off to retrieve a jug of wine. As he poured the deep red liquid into Harald's goblet, Harald glanced over at Sigurd, who was fiddling with a knife in his hand. "You seem quiet this morning, Sigurd," Harald said between bites of crusty bacon. Sigurd set down the knife and replied, "I am just concerned that Thorkel has yet to pledge his loyalty to you. I wouldn't fret about it. Once he gets his affairs in order and joins us in Kirkvoe, I am certain he will see the benefit of working together for the good of our lands." "And how can we be sure he will change his allegiance from Paul?" Sigurd pressed on. "We don't need him to change his allegiance from Paul. We just need him to understand the value of uniting with us," Harald explained confidently. "I say we dispose of him now and be done with it," Fakokk interjected, her voice sharp and cold. The servant returned with the jug of wine and began to pour more into Harald's goblet. "That will do." Harald impatiently waved the man away. "Leave the jug before you go," he added, as he took a large gulp from the goblet. Once the servant had exited, Harald turned to Fakokk. "My dear aunt, why would you suggest such a thing?" Fakokk met his gaze with a piercing stare. "You know why," she stated firmly, before returning to her plate to cut into a piece of fish with her knife. Harald gave her a look of disdain before continuing with his breakfast. The atmosphere became tense until Harald asked Sigurd when they would be ready to set sail back to Kirkvoe. "We should be ready by noon, my lord," Sigurd answered. "Excellent. We shall depart soon after breakfast and meet you at the harbour," Harald announced with a sense of urgency. "Very well, my lord. I will leave some riders to escort you and await your arrival at the boats," Sigurd said as he stood up from his seat. Harald was surprised by his suddenness to depart. "Where are you going, my friend?" "Stay and finish your breakfast," he insisted warmly. "It would greatly please me, my lord," said Sigurd, "but I must make haste back to my men and march them to Kettletoft. It will take a good hour to reach there, and then we must prepare the boats for departure." Harald waved a hand dismissively. "Sit down, my friend. You have enough time to finish your breakfast." With an air of authority, he added, "And I still have plans to discuss with you." Outside, there was a buzz of activity as people prepared for the day ahead. The distant sound of horses' hooves and shouting soldiers could be heard, reminding Sigurd of his duty. But for now, as he returned to his seat, he savoured the moment of rest and camaraderie with his lord. Rays of golden sunlight poured through the window, illuminating the table where they sat with a warm glow. The enticing aroma of freshly baked bread and sizzling bacon filled the room, causing Sigurd's stomach to growl in anticipation. Harald expertly poured wine into their goblets as they conversed, his deep voice reverberating off the ancient stone walls. The fake deacon leaned in towards Harald, his tone hushed and deliberate. "I shan't be coming with you, my lord." Harald paused mid-chew, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. "And why is that, my friend?" A quick glance was exchanged between the fake deacon and Fakokk, not unnoticed by Harald. "I've decided to stay here on Sandey until Thorkel is ready to journey to Kirkvoe," replied the fake deacon. "And what of you, dear aunt? Are you staying as well?" asked Harald, taking another bite of bread. Fakokk scowled at him. "God forbid! I couldn't bear another day on this desolate island," she exclaimed, taking a sip from her goblet. Harald looked at her with derision. "I believe Sigurd is wise to stay behind and keep an eye on Thorkel, ensuring he doesn't make any alternative plans or send a messenger to Paul about our visit and intentions," continued Fakokk. Harald downed the last of his wine. He turned to the fake deacon. "Very well. I will inform Thorkel that you will be staying, and you will escort him to the palace once his affairs are in order." The fake deacon nodded in acknowledgement. Harald's mother gently touched his hand as a gesture of affection and approval. Fakokk rose from her seat, followed by the fake deacon as a sign of respect. Harald, however, remained seated and washed down the last of his bread with wine. "I must go and prepare for our journey," announced Fakokk, smoothing out her dress as she made her way towards the door. Helga also stood from her seat, causing Harald to do so out of respect for his mother. He took her hand in his own. "I will take my leave as well, my son, and leave you and Sigurd to discuss matters further." As the women exited the room, Harald turned to Sigurd with a serious expression. "Now, my friend, let us speak plainly. What are your true thoughts on Thorkel?" Sigurd leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed in contemplation. "I do not trust him, my lord. His loyalties seem flexible." and his absence this morning troubles me." Harald nodded slowly, refilling their cups with more wine. "I share your concerns, which is why I'm glad you'll be staying to keep watch. But remember, we need him, or at least we need him not to ally with our enemies. Perhaps we should consider more permanent solutions," Sigurd suggested, his voice low. Harald's eyes flashed dangerously. "Not yet. We must be patient, play the long game. For now, observe and report. If he makes any suspicious moves, we'll reassess our strategy." Sigurd nodded gravely. "As you wish, my lord. I'll keep a close eye on him and send word if anything seems amiss." Harald clapped him on the shoulder. "Good man. Now, let's finish this excellent wine before we depart. To victory and glory!" They raised their cups in a toast, the rich red liquid glinting in the morning sunlight. As they drank, Harald couldn't shake a feeling of unease. He trusted Sigurd implicitly, but Thorkel was a wild card, and in the Game of Thrones they were playing, wild cards could be deadly. Outside, the sounds of the camp breaking down had faded. The men would be nearly ready to march. Harald drained his cup and stood. "Walk with me to the horses," Harald suggested in a low voice. As they strode through the halls of Scarhouse, Harald's mind raced with possibilities. The stone walls seemed to close in around them, amplifying the echo of their footsteps. They emerged into the courtyard, where Harald's retinue was assembling. Servants scurried about, loading the last of the supplies onto pack horses. Sigurd's own mount pawed at the ground impatiently. As Sigurd mounted his horse, Harald noticed a figure watching from an upper window. Lady Morna herself, her piercing gaze fixed on both Harald and Sigurd. "Sigurd," Harald said in a low voice, "there's one more thing. I have asked Thorkel's permission to take Lady Morna with us today, and he has reluctantly agreed. Her influence over Thorkel concerns me." Sigurd nodded grimly. "Aye, my lord. The lady has a way about her, that's certain." Sigurd's eyes narrowed as he processed this new information. "A wise move, my lord. Lady Morna's presence in Kirkvoe will undoubtedly keep Thorkel's thoughts turned toward you, rather than other allegiances." Harald nodded, his face grave. "Indeed, and it will give us a chance to better understand her own motivations. She's a clever one, that Morna." As if summoned by their words, Lady Morna appeared at the entrance to Scarhouse. She glided towards them, her long dress trailing behind her in the morning breeze. Her face was a mask of serene composure, but her eyes glinted with intelligence and perhaps a hint of challenge. "My Lord Harald," she said, dipping into a graceful curtsy, "I understand I am to accompany you to Kirkvoe. I hope my presence will not be an inconvenience." Harald took Lady Morna's hand and, bowing slightly, said, "Not at all, my lady. Your company will be most welcome on our journey." Morna's lips curved into a small smile, but her eyes remained wary. "You are too kind, my lord. Though I confess, I am curious as to why you desire my presence at court." Harald chuckled, his tone light but his gaze sharp. "Can a man not simply enjoy the company of a beautiful and intelligent woman?" "Indeed, he can," Morna replied smoothly. "Though in my experience, men of power rarely act without purpose." Sigurd watched the exchange with interest, noting the subtle tension between the two. Lady Morna was clearly no fool, and Harald would need to tread carefully. "Your uncle has graciously allowed you to accompany us," Harald said, his tone casual, but his eyes watchful. "I thought you might appreciate a change of scenery and the opportunity to see more of our fair isles." Lady Morna's eyebrow arched ever so slightly. "How thoughtful of you both. Though I wonder if my dear uncle fully understands the implications of allowing me to travel unchaperoned with such esteemed company." Sigurd suppressed a smirk at her veiled barb. The lady certainly had a sharp tongue to match her wit, he thought. Harald merely smiled, unfazed. "I assure you, my lady, your reputation will remain untarnished. My mother and aunt will be travelling with us, and you'll have your own quarters at the palace." "Of course," Morna replied smoothly. "I look forward to the journey." Just then, a commotion at the gates drew their attention. A small group of riders cantered through the archway into the courtyard, their horses lathered and panting. At their head was Thorkel himself, his face flushed with exertion and barely concealed anger. "Harald!" he bellowed as he dismounted, striding towards them with purpose. "What is the meaning of this? You dare to take my niece without consulting me?" Harald's face remained impassive. Sigurd's hand drifted casually towards the hilt of his sword, whilst still mounted on his horse. "Peace, Thorkel. As I told you last night, Lady Morna's presence has been requested at court. You gave your consent, did you not?" Thorkel's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I gave no such consent. I merely said I would consider it, and now I find you've made arrangements behind my back?" Lady Morna stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her uncle's arm. "Uncle, please. There's no need for such anger. I assure you, I am going of my own free will." Thorkel's face softened slightly at his niece's touch, but his eyes remained stormy as he glared at Harald. "Is that so? And what of your duties here, Morna? Who will tend to your menagerie in your absence?" "I've made arrangements," Morna replied smoothly. "Inga has agreed to care for the animals while I'm away, and perhaps this journey will allow me to expand my collection. I've heard tales of exotic creatures in Kirkvoe." Harald watched the exchange with interest, noting how deftly Morna navigated her uncle's temper. She was indeed a clever one. "Come now, Thorkel," Harald said, his voice calm but firm. "Surely you can see the benefits of having your niece at court. It will strengthen the ties between our families and give Lady Morna a chance to experience life beyond Sandey." Thorkel's jaw clenched, his eyes darting between Harald and Morna. "And what of her safety? These are dangerous times, Harald. I won't have her put at risk for your political games." Sigurd spoke up from atop his mount, his voice gruff but reassuring. "I give you my word, Thorkel. No harm will come to Lady Morna while she's under our protection. I'll assign my best men to guard her personally." "You're the last person I would entrust with my niece's life," replied Thorkel, staring at him on his steed. He turned to Morna, his expression softening. "Is this truly what you want?" Morna met her uncle's gaze steadily. "It is, uncle. I appreciate your concern, but I am no longer a child. This is an opportunity I wish to seize." Thorkel's shoulders sagged slightly, the fight seeming to drain out of him. He turned back to Harald, his voice low and dangerous. "Very well, but know this, Harald. If any harm comes to her, there will be a reckoning between us." Harald nodded solemnly. "You have my word, Thorkel. Lady Morna will be treated with the utmost respect and care." As if to punctuate the tense moment, a gust of wind swept through the courtyard, causing Morna's cloak to billow dramatically. She pulled it tighter around herself, her eyes meeting Sigurd's for a brief moment. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect and perhaps something more. Lady Morna returned the nod with a subtle smile before turning back to her uncle. "Uncle, please don't worry," she said softly, placing a hand on Thorkel's arm. "I'll see you very soon." Thorkel's face softened slightly at her touch. He sighed heavily, then pulled her into a tight embrace. "Be careful, my dear," he murmured. As the tension slowly dissipated, Harald turned to address the gathered group. "We must make haste if we're to catch the tide. Lady Morna, are your things prepared?" Morna nodded gracefully. "Yes, my lord." "My trunks were packed at first light." Harald gestured to a nearby servant. "See that Lady Morna's belongings are loaded onto the wagon immediately." The man bowed and hurried off to comply. Thorkel still looked uneasy, his gaze darting between his niece and Harald. "I don't like this, Morna. Perhaps I should accompany you to Kirkvoe myself." "That won't be necessary, uncle," Morna said soothingly. "I'll be perfectly safe with Lord Harald and his retinue. Besides, you have matters to attend to here on Sandey, do you not?" Thorkel hesitated, clearly torn between his concern for Morna and his other responsibilities. "I suppose you're right," he admitted reluctantly. Harald interjected smoothly. "Indeed, Thorkel, I had hoped you might join us, but I understand if your duties keep you here. Perhaps you can join us soon at the palace?" Thorkel grunted noncommittally, his gaze still fixed on Morna. "Yes, I'll be there as soon as I possibly can." He muttered to Harald. "I make this promise to you, my dear Morna," he whispered in her ear. "I will journey to Kettletoft with my men, and make preparations for your arrival at noon, if it pleases you, my lord," the fake deacon interrupted. Harald nodded his approval to the fake deacon. "Very well. We'll meet you at the harbour." As the fake deacon rode off with a small contingent, Harald turned his attention back to the others. The courtyard bustled with activity as final preparations were being made for their departure. "Before we depart, my lord, I must make some final preparations," Morna said with gentle authority. "Of course, my lady," replied Harald. "We shall reconvene here within the hour to begin our journey." Morna gave Harald a curtsy and turned to her uncle with a smile. He acknowledged with a nod of his head. "I will see you before you depart, my dear Morna," said Thorkel gently. Morna headed towards the house and her chambers, her dark hair swaying behind her like a cloak. The soft rustle of her silk dress echoed through the empty hallways, the only sound breaking the stillness. As she entered her room, she lit a few candles and began gathering her belongings. Her hands moved with purpose, picking out clothing and supplies for their journey ahead. As she continued packing, her mind raced with possibilities. This journey to Kirkvoe was both an opportunity and a risk. She knew Harald's invitation was far from innocent. He clearly hoped to use her as leverage against her uncle. But two could play at that game. Morna paused, her gaze drifting to the window. In the courtyard below, she could see the servants loading luggage onto the roof and back of the luxurious black carriage. The sun shone down on them, glinting off the polished surfaces and casting shadows across their faces. Suddenly her mind drifted to Raske, and panic set in. She hadn't said goodbye to him yet. A soft knock at the door interrupted her reverie. "Enter!" she called, turning to see her maid Mary slip into the room. "My lady," Mary said, curtsying. Her soft voice was filled with respect and loyalty. "I've come to assist you with your final packing." Morna smiled warmly at the young woman. "Thank you, Mary. Your help is most welcome, but I have already finished." She glanced around at the neatly stacked bags on the bed. "Could you arrange for these bags to be loaded onto the carriage?" Morna asked kindly. "I'm going to say my farewells to Raske and everyone before we depart. I am so sorry you aren't able to accompany me, but I have been told there will be many maids at the Earl's palace to assist me." Mary nodded obediently. "Of course, my lady. I'll see to it right away." She hesitated for a moment before adding softly, "We'll all miss you terribly, especially Raske. He's been restless all morning, as if he knows something is amiss." Morna's heart clenched at the mention of her beloved horse. "Thank you for telling me, Mary. I'll go to him now." With a final glance around her chambers, Morna swept out of the room and made her way to the stables. The smell of hay and leather filled her nostrils as she entered, and she could hear the soft nickering of horses in their stalls. At the far end she found Raske, his black coat gleaming in the sunlight. As soon as he saw her, he whinnied softly and stretched his neck over the stall door, eager for her touch. Morna approached him with a sad smile, running her hand along his velvety nose. "Hello, my dear friend," she murmured softly. "I'm afraid I have some news that you won't like." Raske snorted gently, his dark eyes fixed on her face. Morna stroked his neck, feeling the powerful muscles beneath his sleek coat. "I must leave you for a time," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm to travel to Kirkvoe with Earl Harald. It's not safe for you to come with me, so you must stay here with Mary and the others." Raske shifted restlessly, sensing her distress. Morna pressed her forehead against Raske's, closing her eyes. I know, she soothed. "I don't want to leave you either, but I promise I'll return as soon as I can." "Nakin," Morna's voice caught slightly as she continued, "you must be brave and strong while I'm gone. And remember, no matter how far apart we are, you'll always be in my heart." Raske nickered softly, as if understanding her words. He nuzzled her hand, his warm breath tickling her palm. Morna felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. She couldn't afford to show weakness, not now. "Lady Morna," a voice called from the stable entrance. It was one of Harald's men, come to fetch her. "It's time to depart, my lady." Morna took a deep breath, composing herself. She gave Raske one last pat, memorizing the feel of his coat beneath her fingers. "Be good, my friend. John and the others will take great care of you until my return." Morna reluctantly stepped away from Raske's stall, her heart heavy. As she walked towards the stable entrance, she heard a distressed whinny behind her. It took all her willpower not to turn back. Outside, the courtyard bustled with activity. Servants scurried about, loading the last of the luggage onto the carriage. Harald stood near the gates, deep in conversation with Thorkel, As Morna approached, their discussion ceased abruptly. "Ah, Lady Morna," Harald said, his voice smooth as silk. "I trust you've made your farewells." Morna nodded, her face a mask of composure. "Yes, my lord. I am ready to depart." Thorkel stepped forward, his brow furrowed with concern. "Morna, are you certain about this? It's not too late to change your mind." Morna met her uncle's gaze steadily. "I appreciate your concern, uncle, but my decision stands. This journey is important, for reasons beyond what you may understand right now." Thorkel opened his mouth as if to argue further, but Harald smoothly interjected, "We really must be on our way if we're to catch the tide. Lady Morna, your carriage awaits." With a graceful nod, Morna allowed herself to be escorted to the ornate black carriage. As she settled into the plush interior, she caught a glimpse of Thorkel's troubled face through the window. She raised a hand in farewell, forcing a reassuring smile. The carriage lurched into motion, the sound of hooves on cobblestone echoing through the courtyard. Morna leaned back against the plush cushions, her heart heavy as she watched Scar House recede from view. The familiar stone walls and towers that had been her home for so long now seemed small and distant. As they passed through the gates, Morna caught a final glimpse of the stables. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw Raske standing in the meadow, having escaped his stall once more, ears pricked forward as he watched the departing carriage. For a moment, their eyes met, and Morna felt a pang of guilt and longing, so sharp it was almost physical. The carriage rounded a bend, and Scar House disappeared from sight. Morna took a deep breath, steeling herself for the journey ahead. The carriage rattled along the rough road, jostling its occupants. Across from Morna sat Harald's mother, Helga, and his aunt, Fakokk. The two women eyed her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "I trust you're comfortable, Lady Morna?" Helga asked, breaking the silence. Morna nodded politely. "Yes, thank you, Lady Helga. The carriage is most luxurious." Fakokk's piercing gaze swept over Morna. "I must say, I was surprised to hear you'd be joining us on this journey. It's quite unusual for an unmarried woman to travel without a male chaperone." Morna met the older woman's eyes steadily. "I assure you, my reputation is of little concern to me. My uncle has given his blessing for this trip, and that is enough." Helga cleared her throat delicately. "Of course, dear. We're simply looking out for your best interests. A young woman's reputation is a fragile thing." "Indeed," Morna replied coolly. Morna's words hung in the air, the tension palpable. She held Helga and Fakokk's gazes steadily, refusing to be cowed by their thinly veiled judgment. After a moment, she continued, "Though I find that a woman's intellect and character are far more valuable than idle gossip." "Don't you agree, Lady Helga?" Helga's eyebrows rose slightly at Morna's bold response. "Well, she began, but Fakokk cut her off with a sharp laugh. "You've spirit, girl. I'll give you that," Fakokk said, her eyes glinting with something that might have been approval. "But spirit alone won't protect you in Kirkvoe. The court is a nest of vipers, and you do well to watch your step." "Ah," Morna inclined her head slightly, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I appreciate your concern, Lady Fakokk. Rest assured, I am not as naive as I may appear. I have my own ways of navigating treacherous waters." Fakokk's eyes narrowed, reassessing the young woman before her. "Is that so? And what exactly are these ways of yours?" "A lady must keep some secrets," Morna replied smoothly. "But I assure you, I have no intention of causing trouble for Earl Harald or his household." Helga leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "Tell me, child, what do you hope to gain from this journey to Kirkvoe? Surely it's not merely for the pleasure of our company." Morna met the older woman's gaze steadily. "Knowledge, Lady Helga," Morna replied. "The world is vast and full of wonders, and I intend to learn all I can. Kirkvoe may be a nest of vipers, as Lady Fakokk says, but it's also a centre of power and influence. There's much to be gained from observing such a place." Fakokk snorted. "Pretty words, girl. But I suspect there's more to your ambitions than mere observation." Morna's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, but isn't that true of all of us?" Harald let out a low, throaty chuckle in response to Morna's comments. He leaned back against the plush cushions of the carriage and smiled, delighted by the playful banter between the three ladies. As they continued on their journey, the rhythmic clopping of horses' hooves and the gentle creaking of wooden wheels filled the air. Through the windows they could see the picturesque landscape of Sandey passing by, verdant fields dotted with grazing sheep and rolling hills in the distance. Helga broke the silence. "Perhaps you're right, Lady Morna," Helga said, her tone softening. "We all have our own motivations. I only hope your time in Kirkvoe brings you the knowledge you seek." Morna inclined her head graciously. "Thank you, Lady Helga. I'm grateful for the opportunity." The carriage jolted slightly as it hit a rut in the road. Fakokk grimaced, adjusting her position on the seat. "I'll be glad when this journey is over," she muttered. "My old bones aren't meant for such rough travel." "It won't be much longer," Harald reassured her. "We should reach Kettletoft shortly." As if on cue, the carriage crested a hill, revealing the small port town in the distance. The harbour was bustling with activity, as the two boats were being prepared to set sail. Raske had followed the carriage for some distance until he decided to veer of the road to find his friend Kelp. Raske's hooves thundered across the grassy fields as he galloped away from the road. His heart raced with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He knew Lady Morna was leaving on an important journey, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. As he approached the shoreline, Raske slowed to a trot, his eyes scanning the rocky beach for any sign of his friend. The salty sea air filled his nostrils, and the crash of waves against the shore echoed in his ears. "Kelp!" Raske called out, his voice carrying over the sound of the surf. "Kelp, are you here?" For a moment, there was no response. Then, a sleek grey head popped up from beneath the waves. Kelp's whiskers twitched as he swam closer to shore, his dark eyes fixed on Raske, his sleek body gliding effortlessly through the water. As he reached the shallows, he barked happily at his friend. "Raske, what brings you here, my friend?" Kelp called out as he waded through the surf, water droplets glistening on his skin. Raske pawed at the ground nervously. "It's Lady Morna," he nickered. "She's leaving for Kirkvoe with Earl Harald. Something doesn't feel right about it." Kelp frowned as he reached the shore. "Leaving? But why?" he said in amazement. "I don't think she had much choice in the matter," Raske replied, shaking his mane. "It all happened so suddenly. She came to say goodbye to me in the stables, but she seemed troubled." Kelp's eyes narrowed as he listened to Raske's account. "That does sound suspicious," he said, his voice low. "Lady Morna wouldn't leave you willingly, not without good reason." Raske nodded vigorously. "Exactly, and there's something else." He hesitated, pawing at the ground nervously. "I overheard some of the stable hands talking. They said Earl Harald has been making plans, gathering allies. They think he means to challenge Earl Paul's rule." Kelp's whiskers twitched thoughtfully. "Politics," he muttered. "Always causing trouble. But why would Lady Morna be involved in all this?" "I don't know," Raske whinnied softly, "but I'm worried about her. What if she's in danger?" Kelp waddled further up the beach, shaking water from his sleek coat. His dark eyes were thoughtful as he considered Raske's words. "You may be right to worry, my friend," Kelp said gravely. "If Earl Harald is plotting against Earl Paul, Lady Morna could be caught in the middle, and Kirkvoe can be a dangerous place, even in peaceful times." Raske nickered anxiously, pawing at the sand. "What should we do? I can't just stay here while she might be in trouble." Kelp's whiskers twitched as he pondered the situation. "No, we can't simply do nothing," he agreed. "But we must be careful. Rushing in blindly could make things worse for Lady Morna." "Then what?" Raske pressed, his tail swishing in agitation. Kelp's eyes blazed with fierce determination. "You need to go with her to Meginland," he said firmly. Raske's ears pricked up at the suggestion, but then drooped again in resignation. "Why bother?" he asked, his voice heavy with defeat. "She doesn't want me to come along." "How do you know that?" Kelp pressed, urgency creeping into his tone. "You told me yourself that she didn't want to leave you and the island." "Yes," Raske admitted, his head hanging low, "but she didn't make any arrangements for me to join her on this journey." "It's not her decision to make," Kelp argued, desperation lacing his words. "She was forced to go with Earl Harald, so she probably had no say in whether or not you could come along. Raske considered this for a moment before lifting his head and declaring, "You're right. I'll catch up with them and make such a nuisance of myself that they'll have no choice but to take me along." With a fierce determination burning in his chest, he turned on his heels and sprayed sand all over Kelp before galloping towards the dunes. "Sorry," he called back, already too far away for Kelp to hear. He raced over the dunes and onto the dirt road, never once slowing down as he made his way towards the harbour. As he approached, he could see the long boat already heading out towards sea with its passengers on board. But Raske refused to give up. He pulled up next to Alvis, Embla, Hulda, and Frey, all of whom were startled by his sudden arrival. "What are you doing here?" grumbled Alvis, clearly irritated by Raske's presence. "I've come to go with my mistress on her journey," Raske declared, his eyes flashing with determination. "Don't be absurd," scoffed Alvis. "The only way you could join them is if you swam to Meginland, and that's nearly 30 miles away. No horse could make it." But Raske paid no attention. All he could hear was the voice in his head urging him to jump. Without hesitation, he reared up and let out a loud neigh before charging towards the edge of the harbour. Lady Morna, who had been seated on the longboat, jumped up in shock at the sight of Raske galloping towards them. "No!" she screamed as he leapt off the edge and splashed into the water. His head broke through the surface as he snorted to clear his nostrils before taking a deep breath. "Turn this boat around," Lady Morna demanded, panic evident in her voice as she turned to Earl Harald. "We don't have enough time to turn back before the tides change," he explained calmly. "So, you're just going to let him drown?" Lady Morna snapped, her tone filled with desperation. But before they could come up with a plan, Raske was already swimming towards them, determined not to be left behind. With a menacing glint in his eye, Earl Harald barked orders at his crew. "Get a line and throw it over the stallion's head." In a flurry of panicked movements, they quickly fashioned a lasso and attempted to capture Raske, but their attempts were fruitless. Morna, growing increasingly distressed, tried to intervene, but Harald held her back. Finally, on the fourth attempt, they managed to wrangle Raske and pull him close to the side of the boat. Morna couldn't bear to watch as they dragged him closer, dreading the thought of him being taken away. "No," she pleaded with Harald. "Please bring him on board." But her words fell on deaf ears. "If he can make it to Meginland, he'll make a fine addition to my stables," Harald replied callously. Morna jerked away from him and rushed to Raske's side as they pulled him alongside the boat. She reached out and stroked his head, tears streaming down her face. "Why did you come, Raske? You should have stayed safe at home." Despite her touch and words of comfort, Raske continued to swim for his life in the freezing water. Every time he tried to rest his legs, his head would sink below the surface. In a desperate attempt to stay above water, he kicked and thrashed about. Morna could only offer words of encouragement from the boat as she watched helplessly. But after an hour or so, even her voice started to falter as Raske grew weaker and weaker. Soon his head was slipping under the water more frequently and for longer periods of time. In a moment of despair, Morna tugged on the rope and screamed at Raske to wake up. And then, miraculously, he resurfaced like a buoy bobbing in the water. But this time, Morna could see something underneath him, pushing him up and keeping him afloat. It was a selkie kelp. She let out a cry of joy and relief as she realized he had come to Raske's aid.